Welcome to PwC's Black Tech Talent, a series that aims to inspire a new generation of black technologists. I'm Charles Samuel, a partner in the firm, and I'm going to be exploring how we can support more young people into tech, particularly from disadvantaged backgrounds, because getting into tech is one of the best and least expensive way to develop a professional career with incredible opportunities. Today, we're going to be exploring social mobility and how we can support young people into tech. This is something that is very much the story of my life, because I actually was born and I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, born to working class parents who never went to uni, and actually it was having access to an IBM XT computer at the age of 11 and 12 that inspired me to get into technology. And since then, I've been a massive advocate of getting others to embrace the same. So, looking forward to the discussion and the conversation that we're going to be having today. Let's get into it. I'm going to be joined by a panel of fantastic individuals here with me in the studio. I'll start with you, Nimi, for an introduction.
Thanks so much, Charles. Hi, everyone. I'm Nimi Patel. I'm the Policy Manager for Skills, Talent and Diversity at Tech UK. Tech UK is a tech trade association with over 900 members, and we're really passionate about making sure the tech sector is reflective of the society it seeks to serve.
Thanks, Nimi. Mark, can I come to you?
Yes, certainly, Charles. I'm Mark Watson. I'm the Chief Executive at Fat Beehive. We're a small digital agency set up in 1997. We build websites for charities, and I've been a champion for the business case for diversity for a very long time. I want to be able to employ the very best people, and at the moment there's a lot of people being excluded from the tech industry, and we want to do something about that. 2 weeks ago we had a Black in Tech event to try and encourage more black people to consider a career in tech and support them into jobs into the digital sector.
Thanks, Mark. And Roger?
My name's Roger Waterman. I'm a senior manager in the forensic investigations team, and I'm a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion.
Excellent. It's fantastic to have you join us today. And Nimi, I'm going to start with you, right? I was looking at a report that you'd written, and there was a stat in there that really surprised me. And that stat says that 19% of people in tech are actually from a working class background.
Yeah, only 19%.
Exactly. And considering the fact that, I'd always thought that getting into tech had a low barrier, to get into it, I was quite surprised by that stat. Do you want to tell us why you think that is?
Sure. So that statistic is from Inclusive Boards, and they found that only 19% of people working in the tech industry are from a working class background, whereas it's 33% in the rest of the UK. And that's appalling. It's shocking. We've got to do more to support people into tech, and that's a lot about myth busting some of the perceived barriers to entry, as well as the actual barriers to entry. We really got to do more on this, and I think Roger can talk a little bit more about the actions we can take on that.
Okay. I mean, and talking about myths, actually, I know, for instance, that one of the myths that people might have is the fact that it's important to go to uni to get into technology, right? And I just wonder whether actually whether everyone on this panel, I mean, did you go to uni, for instance, and get into tech? Maybe Roger, let me start with you. Did you go?
So I did go to university, and I very much appreciated the experience of it. But I think with the tech sector, there's very much of a leveling effect over time, in that you can pick up a lot of skills outside of university. You pick these skills up in college. You could pick up these skills in your own personal time. There's a lot of reading material out there. So I definitely think that there are skills that people can pick up outside of the university experience that add a lot of brevity for them to actually go into the tech sector.
Yeah. And Mark, I mean, what's your thought on that?
As the first person in my family to go to university, and actually my mother was very much, you got ideas above your station by going to university. And my degree, I loved doing my degree, but it had no relevance to my job now. And the first thing I did at Fat Beehive is, when we were advertising jobs, is take out the essential going to university, because I don't think that is essential anymore. I think many people have got different skills that they've picked up in different places. So I think there's good things about going to university. I don't think it doesn't have to be an essential for a job in tech. And certainly a lot of developers have trained themselves, I think.
Yeah, and to be honest, if I kind of reflect on when I started my career in tech, almost 20 years ago now, I Actually, in fact, I mentioned earlier when we started off, I got exposure to a computer, at the age of 11 and 12, and started playing with the IBM XT at that point. And when I finished secondary school, I actually didn't want to go to uni. I went and got a diploma in computing, wanted to start doing that, but being from an African household where, parents tend to tell you, you need to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. My parents were on my neck about going to uni, and that's why I ended up going to university. And when I finished, I went back straight into tech. Just one question. I mean, if you were to be maybe doing things all over again now, I mean, do you think, again, sort of going back to the point that Roger was making there around whether a degree is required to have a tech career, would you advise people that it's important to go to uni or not?
So I'm a first-generation Brit. Both my parents didn't go to university. I did. But I'm fortunate to have a younger brother. He's 5 years younger, and he's studying mechanical engineering. But his generation understand that you don't necessarily have to go to university. There are a plethora of routes available to them. So one of them's doing a degree apprenticeship, for instance, that you get the best of both worlds, doing an apprenticeship and going to university. Someone else is doing an internship, having gone straight, after sixth form, moving into the world of work. So there's so many options out there. It's just letting these young people actually know what's out there. And I think if I had to do my university experience, I think I would still go to university, but I might do different subjects, because back then you didn't really, it's a little bit more narrow, I think, in terms of the advice that was given.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree with that. And as a firm, actually, there is a huge amount that we do around tech degree apprenticeships, and actually that's one of the routes in which we bring people in to the firm right now. So again, if you're watching us and that's something that you're interested in, please, have a look at our website. There are certainly massive opportunities for you to get into PwC through a tech degree apprenticeship, for example. Mark, let me come to you, right? Because I know black marginalization and trying to resolve that is something that you are passionate about, particularly in the tech industry. One question I do have for you is, from an employer's perspective, what do you think is keeping sort of young black people out of the tech sector, as an example? And what can employers do about it?
One of the reasons we set up a Black in Tech event, I was fed up every year with people talking about the lack of diversity in tech. And the problem is, from a recruitment point of view, there isn't a lot we can do because there isn't the people out there. I mean, if you take London, 13% of Londoners are black, but only 3% of the London tech force are black. So the pool that you're going out to recruit from is very small. So when we set up the Black in Tech event is to try to understand what are those barriers that are stopping people getting into tech. I think there's a number of those things, some of them cultural. I think some of them the tech industry hasn't been particularly welcoming or embracing of diversity. And I think there's a number of different barriers we have to jump through to try and get greater diversity in tech. And from a business point of view, we want to do that. One, there's a huge skills shortage in London in tech at the moment. Two, I think you have to have that diversity of thought. If everybody looks the same, thinks the same, and comes from a very similar background, you don't get that diversity of thought, problem solving that you need to be a world-class tech sector. So the tech sector needs that. And right now, you've got, I think, young black men have got unemployment rates of 33% in London. There's a huge pool of talent out there. You've got a skill shortage over here, and the barrier to entry to tech is very, very low. You don't need to go to university to do it. In fact, the great thing about tech is your past doesn't matter. You can start again. And Daniel, that we've just recently taken on, he started his boot camp in January with no knowledge, no experience. In July the same year, he was working with us as a front-end developer. So those barriers, he was a fitness instructor, now he's a front-end developer. So within 6 months, you could be in tech. So that's, I think, for me, there's a lot of work we can do as employers, but we need to reach out and be more proactive. It's no good just sitting here and lamenting the lack of black people in tech and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, no, and it's quite interesting the example you gave there around actually him being able to change career from being a fitness instructor and now being into technology. Yeah. Because actually that's something that I think I've seen happen, very recently as well, actually, with, someone that used to be my PA within PwC. Who, 4 years ago, she decided to sign up for to be one of our digital accelerators within the firm, which basically means that she gets digitally upskilled to go ahead and be able to bring technology to solve problems within the part of the business where she was. She really took to it. And because of that, she decided to change what she did and get more into tech. So she moved from being a PA actually into part of our tech business. And she was just telling me recently, I was speaking to her about a few weeks ago, she's now become a manager within a tech part of our business.
That's great.
And guess what? She's 55. So she actually picked this up when she was right about 50, 51 was when she did that program. And in that period of time, she's basically changed her career and she's now doing something different. So Mark, what you're talking about there is something that's quite important, and there's an opportunity for people actually to change what they do by embracing technology.
Yeah, I mean, one of our, Chantal's, another one of our developers, she was a singer, quite a successful singer-songwriter, again, been pushed down, I think, sort of very culture appropriate sort of role, and then, you know, didn't really like that, and then taught herself coding, and now she's a front-end developer as well. So, and the whole point of our Black in Tech event was to show that there are very relatable people out there that could do this in a relatively short space of time and get some very good jobs in tech, which is good for the business, is good for the tech industry, but obviously very good for them as well.
Indeed.
I think you hit on a good point there around diversity and around the actual value of it, and the fact that if you have lots of people that effectively talk, act, and or think the same, that's not necessarily valuable to a corporate entity. That's why, for me, a big thing about diversity is ensuring that we have the message out there that there is value from diversity, that different ability to effectively think about things in a different way. Problem solving is very much an issue where if you have different ways of attacking that same issue, you can get to a solution in the best way possible. And having those optimal solutions out there to be thought about is what's really going to get success.
The point about messaging is really important because obviously in 2020 we saw the pandemic, but we also saw the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think, you know, a lot of tech businesses put out statements, and now I'm going back to them and saying, well, 2 years on, what have you done for your employees to increase equitable outcomes, not just for your employees or your Black employees, but also your local community? And I think that's really important because otherwise, you know, these fantastic people that you've hired, they don't necessarily are aware of the different ways to upskill and change careers.
Absolutely. I think the other point from that is that we want that diversity at all, but when you employ people, you need to make the places welcoming to them and make it, you know, so not then try to fit them back in to make them think like everybody else, and then embrace that diversity within the organisation. And I think that often fails, is that we want to bring people in and then make them like the rest of us again, don't we? Which actually defeats some of the objectives instead of embracing those different ways of thinking.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, making sure that people can be their authentic selves when they come to work is incredibly important. I go back to something that you talked about there, Mark, around, you know, organizations, you know, kind of getting out there, you know, and getting engaged to make sure that actually, you know, people recognize that there are places where, you know, they can come in, particularly Black individuals, they can come in and build a career. Right, which is why, you know, for instance, if I talk about what we're doing, you know, is UK Black Business Week this week, for instance, and as a firm, we're massively involved with that. You know, not just, you know, actually engaging with them, but engaging more broadly in terms of, you know, articulating what opportunities exist with us for people to come and work with us. So my very good friend Reggie Kelly, for instance, is hosting a session today about, you know, UK opportunities, you know, UK tech opportunities, and so on and so forth this evening. So for anyone that's watching us and would like to actually be a part of that and get to hear, you know, how they can take advantage of opportunities, I will encourage you to please go ahead and sign up for that.
Another really great one is Colour in Tech's Black Tech Fest that took place last week in King's Cross. A lot of it was virtual as well, and I think it looks to do the same thing that we're doing today, highlighting fantastic people who've had experiences in digital technologies that come from a black background, and then show that progression to highlight to different people. I mean, earlier we were speaking about the importance of role models, weren't we? And how that kind of allyship is really important.
Yeah, I mean, so, sorry, Mark, I'll come to you in a minute. I mean, that point about role models, I mean, that is quite important, isn't it? Because, I mean, it is difficult sometimes to be what you can see. Right, and it's a massive thing that we need to make sure that we're making accessible to people, to be able to see people that look like them in sort of senior positions or senior roles that they can aspire to, or in those industries in which we're asking them to get into.
I was going to make the very point. I mean, I think there's lots of things we can do to try and get people into the sector, but at our Black in Tech event, a lot of people that were already working in tech really were looking for some networking, because there's one guy who's saying he's the only black person in a team of 300 people. Talk about imposter syndrome and not feeling it in place. So we need to support people in the sector as well that have got jobs, so there'll be more to do there. So I think networking events where people can get that support from other people, because quite often in their workplaces, they are in a very small minority.
Indeed. Right, Roger, let me come to you, because I've got my own time, and I do want us to be able to get to the questions that are coming from the audience. Just to remind you, if you are watching us, you can send us questions, and we'll go ahead and answer them. So I'll try and answer them, and the very difficult ones I will give to the panel. So Roger, let me come to you. Right, when we were talking earlier, you talked about sort of challenges that we can face as black people when it comes to things like accents and culture in the workplace. I mean, can you bring that to life? I think you had a couple of examples that you could use to bring that to life for me.
Yeah, I think so for myself, growing up in East London, you're very much part of a hodgepodge of lots of different ethnicities, and you somewhat build up your own colloquialism to a certain extent in terms of the way you talk, the way you act, the way you interact with others, etc. But when you go out into the corporate world, it's very, very different. There's lots of different expectations that are put on you. And I think the challenge for myself that I experienced many years ago, and I'm sure others can attest to as well, is that the way you talk, the way you interact, it doesn't fit with the corporate structure, and you're somewhat made to feel as though you have to adapt. Now, that adaptation or conformity, whatever you might want to call it, it's almost like having a second job at times, because you feel as though, right, in order to communicate in these sessions, I have to talk with eloquence. I have to talk really the Queen's English to a certain extent, and it's not something that you're necessarily used to, and it's a challenge. And when you also look at the fact that individuals that are in more senior positions, they talk and act like that, the challenge is really seeing yourself, as you put it earlier, in that position. Can I really see myself at that level? How would I interact with those individuals? And what that also ends up doing is individuals who maybe are extrovert, it may be that they, for whatever reason, become introvert at work. So it's all well and good effectively saying we want people to be their authentic selves, we want people to be true to themselves, but if they don't feel as though they can, they never will be their authentic selves. Now, there are ways around it, as we had talked about previously, which is to effectively have a mentor or role model that you admire and respect, and most importantly, trust, and to have an honest conversation around the challenges that you're experiencing, and then trusting in that person to effectively help you navigate those issues. And it leads into your point around having the role models earlier, which is if you have that role model who can effectively steer you through the corporate landscape, that effectively enables you to manage a career and a successful career, as opposed to thinking about things as just a job that you're in for 1 to 2 years. We want to make sure that people are satisfied in their role, they feel welcome, to your point, and that they can build that long-term career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I'll probably just add to that with helping, and it talks to what you raised earlier, Mark, about the individual who was just the one black person in an organization of 300 people. I think one of the things that is important or possible to do to try and help with things like that is what we've done quite a bit, in PwC around sort of mutual mentoring, and where actually you get someone to mentor their boss or someone from a different background, ethnic or cultural background, because what that does is actually opens a window into a lifestyle or an existence or a culture that you were not aware of before. And with opening that up means actually there's more understanding of difference, and with that understanding of difference, it allows you actually to be able to appreciate where someone else is coming from and reflect that in the way and the environment that you create for them to be able to thrive.
So employers, you know, they would never ask someone to change their accent, you know, so why would they ask someone to change their affect? We deal with people who are quite brutal in the way they speak or straightforward, and we adjust, right? And I think that's the way we should deal with, you know, all employees, and that really comes to a line management issue, but also the company culture. So the person that was the one black person in 300, that's actually really disappointing, because it means that that company hasn't done enough to attract people through, you know, their job ads or whatever, or they haven't retained those people from an ethnic minority background.
And that person, you know, it's tough to be in that environment, and whether they stay in that environment, and you know, they'll make a decision about that at some point. Probably won't stay in that environment because it's, you know, not a very welcoming environment. And I think there's a lot that companies can do. We did our Black in Tech event, and I was very keen to make it a very welcoming event. So we did, you know, jollof rice and grilled chicken and beers from the Caribbean and from West Africa. It was Ghanaian jollof rice, which is the best if anybody wants to know. But it was.
I mean, yes, I would say I totally disagree with that.
But the point was, is I didn't want just to welcome people to our office. I wanted our office to be welcoming, so they felt that they were welcome to the place. And you know, all the emails went from Philip, who's Ghanaian, and so we made sure people felt that they were really welcome at the event. And we had, you know, 75 people turn up at that event, and really interested. And what got me most is there's a huge amount of talent out there that is currently underutilised. And if we want to grow the economy, then actually getting those people into tech would do wonders for the tech industry and for the economy.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Mark. I mean, absolutely agree with that. I mean, there is one thing you said that I disagree with. I should set that straight before we go to questions. And that's, you said something about Ghanaian jollof rice being the best jollof rice. That is totally untrue. Being Nigerian, I can tell you, Nigerian jollof rice is the best jollof rice. Let's go to questions now. I think we've got time to take some questions. The first one is around, you know, where are you seeing good examples of organizations supporting social mobility and black people? So let me come to you first, Mark, on that. Where are you seeing good examples of that?
It's difficult to see a lot of good examples in the tech industry. I mean, I think there's a lot of goodwill out there, and I don't think people are deliberately doing half of this. It's just the systems are set up to make it very difficult to get people into tech industry, to create an environment where they can thrive and grow. So there are some initiatives out there, I think, that are doing better. I think Brent Council are doing some stuff. We're currently working with Southwark. Southwark have been very supportive of what we're doing, and I've got a meeting on Friday with them to see how they can support some of that. I had a huge conversation with DWP, who are absolutely very excited at the idea of getting, you know, training up people from the currently on benefits into jobs. So I think there are some bits out there going on. I suppose it's joined up. I think it's difficult to reach the communities and get them to participate. There's always been how do you take people that feel that the tech industry is not welcoming? And in fact, I had a comment from a black leader of an organisation who was saying the tech industry is so inherently racist, we shouldn't be encouraging people to go into the tech industry because they'll only be disappointed and discriminated against. So I think there's a lot of cultural barriers and other things we need to do. But I would like to see more CEOs of tech companies doing the sort of initiatives we are doing, which are not expensive and not difficult, but actually could make a real difference.
See, I'm going to disagree with Mark slightly there. I think tech businesses are doing, you know, lots on diversity and inclusion because they see it as crucial to their retainment strategy, especially to support their black employees. I think from Tech UK side, it's not happening at the scale and the pace that we want societal change to happen. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. We went through this when we focused on gender diversity. It took some time, and it's not solved, right? It's a constant moving thing, and I think we need to press for progress and push forward with the initiatives that work. So something great that PwC is a part of is the Social Mobility Index, run by the Social Mobility Foundation, and you know, it's a really great way to identify which companies are doing what, and you know, essentially ranking them about the best places to work. work. So lots of great stuff happening, but it needs to happen quicker.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely agree. Thank you for that, Mimi and Mark. Another question on here: how do you welcome different cultures without just focusing on food, music, and entertainment? I mean, Roger, let me come to you on that because you raised something on culture. I mean, how do you welcome different cultures?
I suppose it's really about, it goes back to my point earlier around appreciating and accepting people who aren't like you, and having open and honest conversations around the differences that you're seeing in your people. Yeah. And then pulling back and really not doing that confirmation exercise of trying to input the way you work and who you are onto that person. I think people just fundamentally need to have open minds and be curious about other people.
Yeah, I mean,
try not to stereotype, right? So we don't want to stereotype someone's identity or someone's background or anything. So it's really important, like you said, Roger, to listen to your Black employees. For Pride Month, if you're looking at what you're going to do, listen to your LGBTQ employees. Yeah. Find out what they actually want and what they want represented from the organisation.
And I think the key word there actually is curiosity. It's curiosity, is that openness about wanting to explore and to ask questions and to understand. And I think that will make a massive difference, for everyone if people would just go ahead and demonstrate that curiosity.
It is that curiosity, and I mean, quite often again, people lump sort of BME together, and yet, the experience, the Black African experience in the UK is very different from the Black Caribbean experience. The Bangladeshi experience is very different from other Asian experience. It's understanding that, there are some very different cultures out there with very, very different experiences, and to try and lump them all together into one category is not a great thing. And so if you want to welcome people, is understanding those differences, really.
No, that is very true. I mean, I'm being a Nigerian, someone that comes from Nigeria, there are over 250 different ethnic groupings in Nigeria, as an example. And so someone sees me and asks me, what language do you speak? I'm like, well, I mentioned I speak Yoruba, and they're like, is that what everyone in Nigeria speaks? Well, no, actually, there are several different languages there, and it's important to be able to understand that, because in understanding that, we're able to cater for people's differences in terms of outlook and how they do things. I think we've got time for probably one more question, and that's, what is the one tip that employers can take on to alter their recruitment process to support young people getting into technology? So, shall I come to that on that, to you, Nimi, on that? What's the one thing?
Sure. So we've seen real successes with blind recruiting. So removing identifying information, removing the need for, the required box to go to university, as Mark mentioned, really important to make sure that everyone has at least the chance to apply and get through kind of the interview stages where they can be themselves, which is a little bit more different than being someone on paper.
Yeah. Mark?
Well, we do a lot. I mean, if you go to our website, then we actively welcome people from underrepresented groups on that. There's a video of me talking about how we welcome that. We have our team page, and people can see that 20% of our staff are Black, for instance. But I think actually employers need to be a bit more proactive. I think we need to be going out there, because it's not just about the recruitment. If only 3% of the tech force in London are Black, our recruitment processes could be brilliant, but we are fishing in a very small pool. What we need to do is go out there to schools, into community groups, and actually encourage people to get jobs into tech. And I think if we really want a long-term, world-class tech sector, that's what we've got to do. We've got to bring that talent into the tech pool.
I would somewhat agree with what you said there. I think we need to look at grassroots to a certain extent to really ensure that at a cultural level we're embedding a career in tech as a positive outcome and as something that's an opportunity for the younger generation as well. So I very much agree with corporate actually going into primary school, if I'm brutally honest with you, to really set a standard to kind of say, look, you can actually achieve something. And I think it's really about removing the requirement for university until looking at the pool of people that we're actually recruiting from. So we can be, again, I'm going to be somewhat internal kind of think about the fact that I'm from East London, but looking at people from underrepresented areas, such as, for example, East London, I can't tell you how many intelligent and really curious people there are that I grew up around who would be extremely relevant in tech roles, not just at PwC where I work, but at other places, but they just didn't get the opportunity to get into that sphere.
Indeed. Well, I mean, that is all. Thank you for that, Roger. That is all we have time for now. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the session today. If you are interested in finding out more, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can watch the first episode, which was hosted by my colleague, Joey Jagarajan, which went out, with some great advice and tips on getting your first job in technology. Next month, we'll be discussing allyship, mentorship, and sponsoring, why you need this people in your network, and how to create them. Sign up to watch now on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for joining us.